Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I think the real danger is that over time, this Congress has conceded and delivered its constitutional responsibilities to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue and President Trump and other executives. It's time for Congress to take seriously its responsibilities, including the constitutional responsibility to decide when to declare war. Here at home, our fellow Americans are facing higher costs for virtually everything, for groceries, for electricity, for housing, for childcare, for health care. The list goes on and on. Folks all over the country are working nonstop just to make ends meet. So you would think that President Trump would be focused on keeping his campaign promise to bring down prices. He said he was going to do that on day one of his administration. But that's not what he's doing. He's doing the opposite. He and Republicans right here in the Senate and in Congress are actually driving up costs, including health care costs across the country. Members of Congress on the Republican side voted against extending tax credits to help middle-class Americans afford their health care. In fact, those tax credits expired at midnight on December 31st, and 20 million Americans are seeing their health care costs spike. President Trump is also breaking another promise. He's breaking his promise to keep America from being dragged into costly foreign conflicts. He's not focused on nation building here at home. He is focused on nation building overseas. Exactly what he said he did not want to do. First of all, he bailed out Argentina. And now he says he is running Venezuela. He says he's in charge of Venezuela. In fact, just this morning, President Trump's Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, said the United States would be overseeing the sale of Venezuela's oil production indefinitely. Here's a Washington Post story. U.S. to control Venezuela oil sales indefinitely, Energy Secretary says. Mr. President, that's what this has been about from the beginning. Grabbing and controlling Venezuela's oil for the benefit of Trump's billionaire buddies. That's why Wall Street appears to be drooling at the prospect of making more money in Venezuela. So I think we should start by pointing out the fact that the Trump administration has been engaged in a long campaign of deception and lies to the American people about the reasons for this adventure in Venezuela. They lied to the American people when they said this was all about stopping the flow of drugs in the United States. We all support that goal, but that's not what this has been about. If this was about stopping the flow of drugs into our country, the Trump administration would not have proposed big budget cuts to the Drug Enforcement Administration. They would not have shuttered the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. They shut it down. President Trump talks about deaths caused by fentanyl in the United States. He is absolutely right about that. What he does not tell the American people is that the fentanyl killing Americans is not originating or even transiting through Venezuela. And of course, if President Trump was serious about fighting drugs, he would not, just as he did weeks ago, have pardoned the former Honduran president and notorious convicted drug kingpin Juan Orlando Hernandez. And I should say, even closer to home, in December, we learned that President Trump also pardoned a Baltimore City drug kingpin whom the DEA called, quote, one of the largest cocaine and heroin dealers to be arrested by the DEA in recent history, unquote. That sends a signal to everybody that Donald Trump is willing to pardon people who've been engaged in poisoning our people. So this has not been about stopping drugs for Donald Trump. And it certainly wasn't about removing an illegitimate leader, and Maduro is an illegitimate leader, but Donald Trump cozies up to dictators all over the world. And of course, yesterday was the 5th anniversary of Donald Trump's efforts to overturn a free and fair election right here in the United States. So the president himself has made clear that this is all about the oil. When he announced the fact that the United States had seized Maduro, he said, and I quote, "We're going to get back our oil. And we need total access to the oil and to other things in their country," unquote, meaning other natural resources in Venezuela. And he uttered the word oil 19 times when he announced the seizure of Maduro. Indeed, while President Trump did not consult or notify Congress about his plans, as is required, he revealed that, quote, "the oil companies were absolutely aware that we were thinking about doing something," unquote. So, colleagues, Donald Trump wants to grab the oil, and he wants to do it to help his billionaire buddies. Case in point is Paul Singer. He is the billionaire head of Elliott Investment Management and a Trump mega donor. He recently acquired Citgo, the U.S.-based subsidiary of Venezuela's state-run oil company, in November 2025, so just a few months ago. And he acquired it for approximately half the company's estimated value. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, in an article on January 5th, I'm quoting, "Now Elliott appears poised to reap the rewards of owning Venezuela's most valuable foreign oil asset. The regime change could lead to an increase in Venezuelan oil production, which would likely provide cheap feedstock to Citgo's Gulf Coast refineries and increase the company's value," analysts and refining experts said, unquote. So a huge win for one of President Trump's biggest donors. Now, Mr. President, I think we all need to acknowledge and salute our troops who took part in this operation. They performed magnificently, flawlessly, bravely. And I want to thank them on behalf of my fellow Marylanders. But, Mr. President, it's also outrageous that President Trump would put the lives of American servicemen and women at risk to grab Venezuela's oil to enrich his friends on Wall Street. At least 6 of our American servicemen and women were wounded. Approximately 80 Venezuelans were killed in this operation, including civilians, not to mention the over 100 people who were on those boats over the last couple months who had been killed. And while the Trump administration and congressional Republicans attempt to bask in the euphoria of Maduro's removal, the hangover of running Venezuela is still to come. In fact, it started. In recent remarks on Venezuela's future, after Maduro's capture, President Trump said, quote, "You know, rebuilding there and regime change, anything you want to call it, is better than what you have right now. Can't get any worse," unquote. Well, actually, colleagues, it can. And we've seen it before. 2 decades in Afghanistan, years in Iraq stand as a warning. The United States spilled blood and treasure on state building, fantasies that failed and undermined American interest, and left a more fractured and unstable region in their wake. The United States has no mandate to decide Venezuela's future. That is up to the Venezuelan people, not to be imposed through U.S. military regime change efforts that are really motivated by oil company interests, and not to be dictated by threats of occupation. This time, President Trump has co-opted the U.S. military in service of those goals, benefiting oil companies and his billionaire buddies. And in doing so, he's charted a dangerous playbook that they say they may employ elsewhere. As we all know, since seizing Maduro, President Trump has threatened further action against Cuba, Colombia, and Greenland. After being asked about an operation in Greenland, which he has threatened several times with invasion since beginning his term, President Trump said, quote, "We need Greenland," unquote. And just yesterday, the White House confirmed in a statement that they are discussing a range of options to acquire Greenland, not excluding military force. And when asked about a U.S. operation against Colombia, President Trump said, quote, "It sounds good to me," unquote. Look, what we've seen is President Trump resurrecting a policy from a bygone era, one which would be better left in the dustbin of history, the Monroe Doctrine. And that was encapsulated in his recent press conference as well, when he said that American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. And what he means by that is that he will deploy U.S. forces wherever he wants for whatever purpose he wants. And again, trying to leave Congress out of the equation. And you listen to our Republican colleagues here who apparently just want to give the executive a blank check. If you look at the national security strategy that the Trump administration unveiled a few weeks back, you'll see how serious a change they're proposing is, because it essentially throws overboard the idea that the United States will employ a foreign policy based on values and principles, that we will support a rules-based order, human rights, freedom, and democracy. However imperfectly we've done that, and we've been far from perfect, that has been one of the guiding lights for U.S. foreign policy. And when you throw that overboard in favor of this new policy, which says we will essentially reassert our dominance in the Western Hemisphere, it is clearly a signal to others around the world, or at least this is the way they will hear it, that they get free rein in their neighborhoods, which explains why President Trump has been so weak when it comes to negotiating with Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. We can explain it when we understand that Donald Trump says, well, Ukraine is your neighbor. You, Vladimir Putin, get to do what you want in Ukraine. And so he invites Vladimir Putin to a summit in Alaska, thinks he's going to sweet-talk Putin, and as soon as the summit's over, Russia and Putin escalate their attacks against Ukraine. And maybe in Donald Trump's mind, it's like, well, Ukraine's in your neighborhood, none of my business. That's a very dangerous signal to send. And of course, President Xi, he's looking at Taiwan 90 miles away and saying, well, that's in my neighborhood. So Donald Trump has unleashed this idea that we're going to focus only on the Western Hemisphere, or mostly on the Western Hemisphere, and that we're essentially going to live by the rule that might is right. And when you unleash that idea around the world, other significant powers will listen, and it will make the world a lot more dangerous, and it will undermine American interests. So, Mr. President, I do want to close where I started, which is instead of engaging in these costly foreign adventures that cost billions of dollars and put American lives at risk, we should be doing what candidate Trump said he was going to do, which is focus on making sure we improve the lives of American people right here at home. That's not what the president's doing. That is what we should be doing, and we should start by saying no to this foreign illegal adventure by supporting Senator Kane's resolution, and then we should get about making sure that we work to bring costs down here in the United States, including, after the House passes later this week, legislation to restore those tax credits that help people afford their health care. We should take that up in the Senate and get it passed. Let's focus on helping the American people here at home rather than putting Americans and their lives at risk in costly foreign adventures to get our hands on Venezuela's oil for the benefit of Donald Trump's donors and billionaire buddies. And I yield the floor.